Like so many people are told that they are too much, that their needs are too much, that the things that the way they express themselves is too much. And it's like, what does that, when you break that down to yourself, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, how can I be too much? I'm being myself. I'm not too much, right? Like, you are not too much. Like, ever, right?
That's
Ever.
like medicine.
I would have like weird heart palpitations and flutters, and my body was letting me know, right? It's so interesting how your body is always the thing that you can pay attention to. And I started realizing, oh my gosh, it's because I'm taking for granted the gift that the universe is giving me. Like, and I'm not. It's a human thing. It's a human desire that we have to be intimate with others. It's a part of our programming, and we can try to push it down and thwart it all that we want, but it doesn't make it go away. Like, that doesn't make it go away. It doesn't do anything but shackle it. And when we shackle when we cage an animal, when we shackle someone, they're gonna fight back, they're gonna lash out, and unfortunately they're gonna lash out at the wrong people.
Gotta get all situated here. It's a whole process. Oh, I love your laugh, by the way.
Oh, thank you.
That was my goal, was like, if we can get some giggles on the episode, we'll go successful. So we're already off to a great start. I love it. Well, let me welcome everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Heart to Heart. My name is Carly, and I am joined by Taylor, aka Lotus of Lotus Tarot. And I am so excited to get to have a heart to heart with her today. Welcome, Lotus, to the show. So glad to have you.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be with you, Carly. So
yeah. This is our first time getting to be together over Zoom. I have followed Lotus's work for a couple months now and have a very personal connection to it. It's played quite a role in my healing journey as of late, as I think it is for a lot of people, as it seems. So I'm super excited to get to know a little bit more about you and your background and kind of what brought you to where you currently are, and the gifts and the what feels like literal magic sometimes that you are offering through your channel. The way the messages speak so clearly to me, and I read the comments and I see so many of us are getting so much out of that space. And so just thank you for everything that you're doing and the courage that it takes to share yourself so publicly. And I see how much value it's bringing to me and to others. And just thank you, first of all. So with that, origin stories and your background, I mean, dude, we're beautiful, complicated creatures. And so there's so much that we could go into here. And you drop so many little nuggets through your readings and your videos. So like, I know you're a musician and I would love to hear about that. Your collection behind you is quite impressive. I'm sure we could dive into all kinds of things. But really, I think my most burning question that I've had since I started watching you. Watching you.
That's a different channel.
Right. Since I started watching you is Lotus Tarot. Like, where does that come from?
Yeah. So Lotus Tarot actually comes from probably one of the most meaningful things to me, aside from Lord of the Rings when I grew up, because I was obsessed with anything that was high fantasy. I was all about. But Lotus Tarot specifically came from another, I guess, piece of media that really, really meant a lot to me growing up. It was kind of my safe haven. It was the one show that my sisters and I would watch together, and it brought us very close together. But was Avatar: The Last Airbender, and I do talk about it a lot on my channel. I have a deck that's dedicated to Avatar: The Last Airbender. But Lotus Tile was something that Uncle Iroh used in his game for Pai Sho, and he was always my favorite character. I always gained so much wisdom from him every time I would watch the show, which I'm one of those people that will watch a show many, many times. Or like I've probably seen the entire series, I don't know, 12 times. That's probably honestly downplaying it pretty significantly at this point, but I have watched it a lot. And what I love about it is that I gain something new each time. But the lesson of the Lotus for me was always something on top of the Avatar: The Last Airbender reference that really resonated with me and really stuck with me. And I feel like so many people can relate to that, being like a lotus, right? Blooming from adversity. It's one of those flowers that grows in a place that it really shouldn't, it's kind of defies what you expect. So I wanted to bring that to my channel so that I could, I don't know, do something different. Not that I'm trying to break the mold in tarot or anything like that, but I do like to go outside the box a little bit, even with my 18 plus readings and things like that. I try to offer just different nuggets in tarot that that I haven't seen personally and in some other channels. So yeah, so that's a long-winded way of giving you the answer, but yeah.
Dude, long-winded is my speed, and
Oh,
maybe you too. That's one of the pieces that I absolutely love about your readings is how long they are and how in-depth they are. So, like, that's for me. I mean, straight up my alley. So that's where heart to heart, same kind of thing. Like, we're here to just let come through whatever wants to come through. And however long that takes, dude, like, why would you rush pleasure anyway? Why does it have to be shorter? Like, I don't know. I'm right there with you. Long-winded, more than welcome. And Lotus, oh my gosh, I had no idea. See, I have like the symbolism or the reference to The Last Airbender or the adversity piece. I love all of that. That like so deep. So like what a good symbol for you and your channel. Um, Tarot is another space that like I was really curious. Like you seem you seem to have such like a natural way of like divining through the cards, but maybe you have just like tons and tons of experience, or do you feel like you seem really connected to the universe like via your intuition? So how much is like experience versus how much would you say is like directly downloading and it's more of a channeling experience?
yeah, so I feel like a novice many times whenever I'm reading. So it's always so funny to me, honestly. Whenever people have asked me for advice with tarot, I always I feel like my imposter syndrome lights up really hard for that because I'm just like, oh, not me. I've only been reading tarot for a couple of years, I'm still kind of new to that. So I would say probably anywhere from 65 to 75% is just me intuiting, it's just the download. But I love tarot, and Gemini is my south node. I know you
Yeah.
and I have kind of talked about north and south nodes, but with that Gemini south node, I do have this natural propensity for just wanting to learn new languages, new things that I can use to communicate with others. So tarot felt like a divination tool that always captured my attention. But I really didn't start learning how to read it until a couple of years ago. So yeah.
I gotta think that's so inspirational for people to be I get a similar reaction when people are like, oh wow, how long have you been studying astrology? And I'm like, 3 years. And I taught myself. They're like, no way. But a lot of it is, you know, like what you're saying, like it's just another language. And probably you've been crafting a part of your message for a long time. And tarot, the lens of tarot is newer, but like
Mhm.
the flow of energy coming through feels like something that you've been establishing kind of apart from tarot. Would you say that's accurate?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I feel like the connection that I have with the universe is definitely something that has been present for a long time. Even if I didn't understand it fully, I think it was being cultivated for a much longer period of time than my understanding of tarot. So,
Sure. So that like takes us a little bit further back into the origin story and more like, yeah, like, what was it like growing up as what seems like a deeply intuitive person, in the Midwest, a fellow Midwesterner, hello,
Oh.
Kansas and Missouri,
Oh.
like welcome from the Midwest. Yeah, like what was that like to, what I know of the Midwest, it's like this space of geography is pretty conservative, pretty like, not necessarily blast from the past, but they like the old-timey things, Like it's just a slower part of the world than a lot of other places I've been. And maybe St. Louis isn't quite as like extreme in those ways as like a rural Midwest place, but still I gotta think like it's not exactly the leading edge of spirituality and self-development. So like, yeah, what was it like coming from, is that where the adversity was? Like, do you feel like you bloomed in a place where you probably shouldn't have, But
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. I grew up actually, so even though I live in St. Louis currently, I grew up in a small town about 45 minutes to an hour outside of St. Louis southward. So uh it was definitely, like you said, not a leading edge on spirituality or self-development. It it was, I definitely had a tough childhood. My siblings and I, we grew up in poverty. We were definitely not a wealthy family by any means. But all of the adversity that I went through as a kid, I talk about on my channel very briefly. I experienced, without just trauma dumping, I guess, onto anybody. I experienced a lot of abuse as a kid. Domestic violence was something that was pretty typical in my household. So there was a lot of adversity, and it did not feel safe being who I was. So I definitely hid that part of myself, even from me. Uh, and it wasn't until I finally broke free of that, I went off actually to live in Chicago, and I studied music and theater and dance there, that I really started to blossom into Lotus, into myself. At that point, even though I didn't identify myself that way as Lotus, I could feel that part of me starting to awaken even then if I look back. So yeah, it was definitely not an easy thing to be an intuitive child. Even though I could always kind of feel people. I was very, I guess, empathic in a way. I could feel people's emotions, and it made, I think, the abuse part of childhood that much more difficult. And I feel like a lot of the time, children in homes like that, they do experience that, which is again, that's why I try to craft readings outside of my 18 plus ones that really try to help people on that journey. Because a lot of the time, tarot readers do attract people who have been on similar journeys. So I kind of knew going into it that I was going to encounter a lot of people that were on different parts of the same journey that I've been on, which I knew was going to be difficult in some cases just because of the darkness of some of my past. But it didn't make me shy away. It made me want to be there that much more, because I was thinking, I want to be that safe haven for somebody that's going through something like that, even if it's just them processing what they've been through. So that was sort of, I guess, the deep dark past of my origin story that led up to, like I said, this very beautiful thing that I do want to share and give back to the world, in my own way.
it's so often like that. I feel like,
Yeah.
the gifts that we're the most passionate about giving are the ones that like saved our own freaking life at some point.
Mhm.
Um, was there a safe haven for you? Like when you went away to Chicago, like in your music place, like did you find a safe haven in the world that kind of let you bloom and blossom?
Absolutely. I did. Yeah. So as dark of a spot as that part of my life was, being, a kid, being an adolescent in a home like that, I found some of my safe havens were music. It was, getting into theater, being immersed in dance. Art in general was something where I could pour my emotion into in a safe way. So I think that's probably why it always comes through for me in readings. Like, I feel like I'm constantly getting downloads from the universe of, hey, you should tell other people to do that same thing, which it's not like I'm telling anybody anything that they don't already know or anything that you're not hearing in media anywhere else, but just giving that extra confirmation that, yeah, this would be really beneficial for you. But yes, that was, for me, that was my safe haven. And then as an adult, tarot did become a safe haven for me because I got into tarot when I was very sad. I was very sad about relationships that I had been in, because who hasn't been through rough breakups, right? But that was actually what inspired me to watch my first tarot reading. I'll never forget, like, I watched Aso Tarot for the first time, and she just got me. I was so amazed, and it really interested me, but it also made me feel so safe and so seen. And I think it's just absolutely beautiful. So that also did become a safe haven for me too.
I love that. Yeah, there have been other tarot readers who, like, when they channel, it's like they're speaking about like freaking my Akashic records or something. Like, you're tapped into my soul. Like, how do you do that? And then to see that there's like hundreds or thousands of people like having that same experience, like, do you ever feel like it kind of shows you like the core of humanity, like running through us all, that we can all feel so seen by three messages,
Yes.
like, do you know what I mean? Like, how it really, it shows me that we're so much more similar than we are different.
Mm,
It's very unifying is a good word for it.
absolutely. I think about that all the time, whether it's on my channel or anyone else's. I'm always amazed by that, about how connected the collective really is. And I love when people make that connection for themselves in the comments and they share that, because I just think that that's so beautiful, and it is a way to unify. So I
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah, like, you're not alone,
Yeah.
like, in our pain and in the darkness, like, it can look like you're alone or you can't see if anybody else is there, but oh my God, like, we're just never alone. We really aren't. And it takes a while in our healing process to like get to that place where we can connect, like, I definitely resonate with that. It takes a lot of safe havens being there, fostering the little blooms and progressions. I absolutely am going back though to what you were saying about like always being into high fantasy.
Mhm.
Like,
Yeah.
did that have anything to do, you think, with like your darkness and your like real life, whatever that is? But are the two connected? Is that a thing?
Mm. Yeah, that's a great question. And actually, yeah, I'm happy that you brought that back up, because that's a great little nugget to go back to. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, I would definitely say that for me was a safe haven as well. It was definitely connected, where, it's that Piscean escapist tendency. I definitely have some Pisces in my chart. And that for me was a safe place to just escape to, whenever I was feeling alone or feeling like things were just getting out of control and chaotic around me. I could dive into a high fantasy novel or a film or something like that, and I could really put myself there, with my imagination. So,
Yeah. And now you like take all of these little threads of all of these stories that you have and the songs and the all the references and like pepper them back into your readings to paint these pictures. And it's like, I have Chiron conjunct my sun. And so I have like a weird relationship with pain where like, pain, humans as a group, like, we tend to hate on pain pretty severely. And yet the most painful things we go through, it's like the lotus, like, you get something out of it that is healing. It is medicine by the end of it. and maybe it's a journey to get there, but that is one of my favorite things to hear about somebody's origin story is like, how did the adversity, how did the darkness eventually fuel the light that you're now doing? We all want to shine so bright and like help and be of service and add value. And it's like, yeah, but mining the depths of our darkness is kind of how you find
Mhm.
those little diamonds to share with the world. And, what looks on the surface like bright shiny people that's like all over YouTube at this point, happy shiny people. Um, what looks on the surface like that, it's like, yeah, behind the scenes though, like dark, like light is born from darkness,
Mhm.
period. So like aversity from pain is like aversity from light.
Mhm.
And yeah, it doesn't surprise me that you have something like that in your past where you had like severe pain that you had to move through like a gauntlet. I mean, it shapes a person. You can kind of start to see it after a while. It's like you wouldn't be that full of love if you haven't absolutely lived in hell on earth,
Mhm.
like yeah.
Absolutely. And I think that's beautiful. And it's a beautiful way to put that. Sorry to interrupt. I
Oh no,
don't
no, you're good. You're good.
I but having in order to have light, and I talk about this a lot in my readings, and it's it's not like this profound thought that I just came up with, but in order to have light, we have to have shadow. And that's why I tell people to really embrace those parts of themselves and really learning how to love that part of themselves, because it will, even though, like you said, even though there are moments where we want to run from our pain, and I went through that so significantly, and I think we all have, in our own way. Everybody's pain is their pain, and there's no competition about that, right? Like we all feel it, and it doesn't feel good, and we want to run from it. But I think when we lean into it and we learn how to accept those parts of ourselves and really truly love those parts of ourselves, I just feel like it opens up this space in us that we just didn't even know existed. And I honestly, and this is going to sound weird, but I am so grateful for all of the hardship that I've ever been through in my life, because I know that it is what created the space to love others the way that I can at this point. Like I wouldn't be able to relate with some of the people that I feel like uh, might want my guidance or might like need the comfort if I had not experienced some of that myself. And so I'm just very grateful for that. Anytime I look back at that, I'm never thinking about why did that happen to me. I'm always thinking, well, why not? Why wouldn't that happen to me? I'm a human being, and we all unfortunately go through pain, right? And I think it's so that we can be in a weird way connected, not just through pain, but through the love that comes through that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. Um, yeah, like pain and suffering, which is not the same thing as pain, which is another thing that I love to deep dive into. Um, it's the difference between pain and suffering, but both I think are incredibly unifying. Again,
Mm.
to like go back to that concept of like there's a shared humanity in we all have pain. And there's
Mhm.
there's another concept that as part of my healing lately I've been noodling on or whatever is this concept of trauma. And as it came into my consciousness, it like trauma is like a violence or like kind of a big T trauma, like something that left a scar.
Mhm.
And I don't have anything like that. Like in my past, I've been so fortunate and a little bit brainwashed into thinking I had such a great childhood because I have no big T trauma. And
Mm.
oh my God, like what I'm excavating, what your readings have been helping me excavate is a shit ton, like death by a thousand paper cuts, a shit ton of little T trauma that like doesn't leave a scar. It's like just a little bruise and like that's no, just get over it. It's fine. Like you're fine. And like it's so subtle in its own way, but like all of those subtle little hurts added up into something that like you were saying, like it's just not safe to be who I am. Like my natural self is not safe here. And it has taken like decades of safe or like a decade of safety to like start to get that to like crack apart. Um, so yeah, like I don't know if you like think about that, like big T trauma versus little T trauma and how valid all of it is. Like they're really, and maybe not everyone is making that distinction of like trauma is only the big T stuff, but I definitely kind of got that impression when I first started being, informed about trauma.
Mhm.
And mine was definitely in a category that was kind of like over here and maybe not as bad, except is there such a thing as like, it's all relative. So yeah,
Mm.
what do you do with that?
I I completely agree with you. And, actually, for the longest time, it's interesting, when I was younger, I used to be very protective of my trauma. I don't know if you've ever experienced this or if you've ever seen, but I was very protective of my trauma because I identified with it so heavily, right? And it became a core part of my personality and it really dictated the things that I did. It left little room for any love in myself because of that. And I did not realize how sneaky that was until I started thinking about exactly what you're talking about, little trauma versus big trauma. Why am I trying to make it, a distinction? Because I will be honest, like the a past version of me probably would have been like, yeah, no, big T trauma is different, but now I'm in a space truly where I see, abuse is abuse, trauma is trauma, pain is pain, and it's all relative. And everybody experiences that in their own way, on their own level. And there should be no, well, my trauma really wasn't that big of a deal, because that is sending a signal to yourself that you aren't that big of a deal, that you don't deserve to feel the way that you feel. It's invalidating yourself, and it's not fair for you to do that or for anybody else to do that to you. And a lot of the time, the reason that we do that is because we were told by someone along our journey that our trauma wasn't that important or that their trauma was bigger than ours. And when I started piecing that together for myself on why I was so protective of my trauma, because I'd experienced that same thing of somebody trying to tell me, well, your trauma isn't as bad, it's fine. I got, I wanted to latch onto it, and I realized that's not the answer. I want to be more tolerant of not just my own trauma and validating that, but validating others as well. So I'm really happy that you actually bring that up.
Yeah.
And I think little T trauma is the same. I just think it's trauma, you know.
Such a good distinction, though, I think, for anybody, whether they do come from a place of kind of like holding this big T trauma as a core piece of their identity. I totally have done that. I've seen it. I think it's part of our humanity where we're all kind of trying to make meaning out of
Mm.
the shitty things that happen to us, Like obviously it's a core piece of my identity. Why would I have gone through all of that if it was like, because it is, but not exactly in the way that you thought, Like it was there so you could transmute it, and then the gift is the core piece of your, who you are.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. 100%.
Hmm. Um, yeah. Yeah, that has been like maybe this is a fine place to kind of pull it into when I did find your work and oh God, all the awesome things that I have gotten out of it. I had never even watched an 18 plus reading before you. And I'll take it a step further and say, even though I had listened to a lot of tarot pick a card readings, I didn't ever listen to the loved ones, like which is like 99% of the
Yeah.
ones that are out there are about your soulmate and your person and what are they thinking about you and like all of these things. Like I just like took that whole category and just kind of like put it over here like I'm good. Thanks. And so then I gotta call it like a sexual awakening, basically, that has been being facilitated as a part of what I was sharing with you, the Taurus North Node journey, which, to kind of like go up a notch, higher level, it's like that Taurus North Node has been such a journey of embodiment for me, like coming down into my physical body. Like I tend to be, all up in my head or whatever.
Yeah.
Um, it's a Gemini thing. Like it's a Gemini Virgo mutable energy thing. Like I have a whole universe in my freaking brain. And how could you
Mm.
not get lost in there, right? Like, okay, that makes sense. It's no worries. But yeah, this Taurus North Node journey of like bringing that down into my body and almost immediately being met with kind of the demons at the gate in my body as far as like why I've chosen to just stay the fuck out of there. So like religiously, who needs to go in there? It's scary as all get out. Stay away. Beware. Enter at your own risk. It's scary. Um, so yeah, like at the beginning of the Taurus North Node thing, it was like a shit ton of facing what felt like at the time like my deepest fears. And
Mm.
that is how I like started to get into my body. And then over the course of the last like year and a half through this transit, um, I've cultivated like a layer of safety and embodiment that has let me feel safe enough to like basically let the body do what the body naturally does, which is to be turned on,
Mhm.
like it's so natural. And that's the part where like, you know, enter Lotus with like, here's the next piece of like, oh, you're ready for turn on? Here's a whole library of little speeches, little stories that let you paint this fantastic picture in your brain of like, yeah, what do you want? You're not telling anybody what to want. You're just like creating this container where sexuality and play is totally safe. And
Mhm.
then we get to put our fantasies in there. And so I've gotten to like meet myself for like some of the first times in my life, meeting that part of myself, like while I'm listening to your readings and like having this experience that you're facilitating in my mind. So again, just thank you for
Oh.
like the guided introduction to a part of myself that has been, part of my little T trauma, like told that that part is not acceptable and that part is gross or needs to be kept in private or not exist at all or like whatever it was that got me to believe the message that not only is my sexuality not safe, it took me years of healing to even realize that I believed that. The first thing was like, I'm bad. I'm a bad one. I'm a monster. Oh my
Mhm.
God, like look at how bad I am. Oh God, like that was the demon at the gate keeping me out of my body was like, don't let yourself be seen. Don't let yourself, really be intimate with anyone because if they really see what's in there, they're gonna know that you're a monster. And like just knowing that that's like fucking true for decades of my existence.
Mhm.
And all of it was from little T trauma. All of it was from a perfectly happy childhood, Like I didn't even freaking know because like that's the hard part about little T trauma, I think, is that it's so small. You're like
Mhm.
freaking gaslit into
Mhm.
like, was it even a thing? Like, did it even happen? Like, maybe I'm overreacting. Maybe I'm just dramatic. Like my mom always tried to convince me that
Mhm.
it was, like
Oh, yes.
uh it's insidious. And so, yeah, your readings and the the nature of them, like the natural humanity that is our sexuality and the grace with which you take us into that space. Like, I'm just so curious, like, how does one become that comfortable in that arena to be able to like facilitate that for other people? And you do so with such levity, which I think, the giggles and the playfulness like adds to the safety because you clearly feel so safe. And so
Mhm.
that is definitely the main piece that has magnetized me to you because I very much want that same level of safety and playfulness within that arena of myself and which I'm a brand new beginner, but dude, like I'm in the arena. I may not know what to do in here, but I'm standing on the dirt and that's really exciting all by itself. So yeah, like maybe a little bit of that part of your origin story. Like, how do you come to do that specifically with your tarot?
Yeah, I wish I had a clear answer on that. I mean, I will muddle myself through this. Thank you also, before I even say that, I do want to just acknowledge the fact that what you're sharing is so vulnerable. And thank you so much for having the courage to talk about, you know, your journey through sexuality, through understanding your sexuality, accepting it, acknowledging the fact that, you know, there is a part of you that feels shame for your own desires, which I feel like is something that many people do experience in their life, right? I feel like it's very relatable. So thank you so much for sharing that. Like, and I'm really happy and proud of you for being able to face that part of yourself, because a lot of people, they do shut down for a really long time over that because it's hard to face, like
Oh
you've
God,
probably experienced, right?
so
So
scary. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
Deep
but
compassion for anybody who is also waking up through your content, who's a brand new beginner standing in this arena. I don't know what the fuck to do. Great, you're in good company. We're all here. It's fine. Yeah.
we're all here together.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess so. It's strange. Sexuality was always something that weirdly I have felt very comfortable in. And I never understood why. That was always just a part of myself that I was able to embrace. And don't get me wrong, there have definitely been moments, where I have felt like, oh my gosh, I'm a monster. I can't believe that like that part of me exists sometimes. But again, I there's always been this acceptance for that part of me that I struggled with in other areas of myself, but with sexuality, it was just something I enjoyed. I've always been the kind of partner. So with my, previous partners, with my current partner, I talk about sexuality with them a lot. I talk about, I'm not afraid, I'm not shy about telling people what I want, how I want to be touched, things like that. I want to have that kind of connection. And I'm just, I'm very forward, I guess. And it can sometimes take people off guard. But I think it's a beautiful thing. And what I love about offering that to someone else, not that I think I'm this doorway or anything like that, but I have noticed with partners of mine or even friends where I have been a source where they can go to and they can just pour out whatever their desires are and be like, this is what I actually like, this is what I want. And I feel like there's this safety, I guess, probably because I've created it for myself. And I've noticed a change in them that they create just by being open with me, opening those gates, like you said. So it's really lovely. And I think that's what kind of inspired me to want to do the 18 plus readings, because I have had so many experiences like that in my, physical life outside of YouTube, where I have had conversations like that. So I guess in a way it felt, like I said, very natural. And I'll giggle and stuff, but it's how I talk to my friends. It's how I would talk to my partner about sexual desires and talking about their fantasies and stuff. I want to create that intimate sort of experience for people so that they do start to feel safe in themselves, in their waking lives, so to speak. So, yeah.
Again, I wish I had that, like we all have our own things, and I'm not trying to be anybody else, but like what a cool thing to have, like, and I think maybe we all have a part of ourselves where we do face adversity on some pieces, and then there's another part where it's like I was kind of born for this, like it's just kind of how I'm wired. And how beautiful that you would recognize like how much comfort and what is like openness, opening, like blossoming that you see through people who are in the presence of that. Like, again, like you don't really have to do anything. It's just like what you don't do, the fact that you don't shame them or judge them or whatever. And I get that from your readings too, like loud and clear, is that no judgment. Like it's so inclusive, and like it just feels like like a deeply accepting energy for our natural humanity. And that, like, one of the pieces in my not being connected to this part of myself, I used to call myself a robot. Like, I used to think of myself as a robot, like as a machine, because I was like so disconnected from my body and like the part that is not a robot, that is like up and down and has these desires, and like scared of your own desires is a piece that you touched on a little bit, but can we go back to that? Because I feel like that's where I'm at, you know? Like, I'm having fantasies and I can see what I want, but then I'm like, how are you going to tell somebody that? How are you going to, like, you know, find a place in this world that's safe enough? And I have enough trust in the universe to know, like, it's being brought to me, but
Mhm.
still, I have to show up there, you know, and like saying things out loud when, yeah, that's the part that, like, even allowing myself to know what it is, but then communicating it. Oh man, like, probably no tips and tricks, but do you have anything in that ballpark of like, how do you ease yourself into that?
Yeah, so I have found that for me, so um okay, so kind of getting into my birth chart a little bit. I have Venus and Taurus in the eighth house. So, it's that Scorpio Taurian kind of, yeah, they've always been sort of grounded in my body, but I never shied away from, you know, pleasure with myself first and foremost. And I think it always comes back to, I know we talk as tarot readers a lot about self-love and how that is what radiates love outward. And I think you can really sort of see that even with physical intimacy, with physical love like that. So, you know, if you feel like you're scared of voicing that to someone else, it's probably a sign. And I'm so sorry, I do not mean to be like again, condescending or pretending like I'm this profound thought or anything like that. I hope that it's not coming off that way. I just
Never come across that way. You
um
have depth of humility that is so rare in this world. And so I wish I could just, like, because I hear you say that sometimes, like, where you're not trying to be authoritative, and it doesn't sound like that at all. I don't think. So, that's my opinion. One person's opinion.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure. I was like, oh gosh, I don't want to be, stepping all over and yeah. But I would say as a tip, just for myself, I have found that something that has helped me is to just, in a weird way, it's sort of like doing mirror work and telling yourself affirmations like I am beautiful, I am strong, but talking about your desires with yourself, if you have a hard time even just saying those out loud to yourself, it's going to feel so unsafe to say that to anyone else because you haven't created that safety in yourself. And so anytime I feel like there's a desire that I am maybe a little bit scared of, and I'm scared of telling someone else, I talk with myself through that. So I talk to myself a lot, but, but yeah, I think that that can help.
Oh, and like, so do you tell yourself like you're pretending you're telling somebody else, or is it like you and you, like having this, you know what I mean? The difference?
Mhm. Yeah, so I've done both. I usually try first to talk to myself just like I'm talking to myself, like I'm talking me to me, and I'm just being honest about what I actually desire. And you can even start small, just start letting yourself daydream and fantasize about the things that you actually want because I have talked to friends and partners who I've discovered actually shame themselves before they even allow themselves to fantasize. The fantasy will start and then they will shut down because they're so ashamed of it. And I've helped guide in whatever way I can through that by telling them, like, think about like how you are perpetuating the shame that little T trauma that you felt. You are perpetuating that by shaming yourself in your own head that is supposed to be your safe space. Like your head is your space. And that should always feel safe for you, even though oftentimes it doesn't. So there's no shame there. But with our deepest, darkest desires, our sexual desires, they should at least feel safe up in our, headspace. So yeah, I think just allowing yourself to actually play through that fantasy and start to be okay with, like I said, exploring your body even through those periods of time, which can be really uncomfortable. Like, and again, I think that starts to open up space for this incredible self-love. And as that starts to fill up, then it feels much safer to expose that to someone else.
Yeah. Yeah. I've definitely experienced that in general. Just like my podcast is a perfect example where I was talking out loud, like telling my stories in my bedroom by myself, like long before I was ever recording them to put on the podcast. So yeah, like I can definitely see where if you're not safe with you, of course it doesn't feel safe to like put yourself in anybody else's hands. And I think there is like what you're saying of like even just as soon as you start picturing the fantasy, the shame, the voices that start coming, like basically one of the first things that somebody says in my brain is like, what if the world, like I don't know if you've ever heard this, but there's a famous investor, Warren Buffett, who says like use the newspaper test. Like if your action was put on the front page of the New York Times, how would you feel about it? And I'm like treating my sexuality like this. Like it's going to be on the front page of the New York Times. And why am I doing this to myself? Like it's just inside my brain. And I won't even let myself have the fantasy because I wouldn't want the whole world to know about it. And it's like, why do I have to make that jump? Part of me thinks like there's some ego somewhere in there that wants to keep me apart. Like it's introducing fear to like keep me apart from the fantasy and the ride of like letting that go and like who is the person, who is the version of me that would be capable of living that out like in the real world. She's way more powerful than I am. And so then here I am like policing inside my head because I don't want my sex life on the front page of the New York Times. Like this is why I'm so vulnerable and I talk about my internal workings, because when you bring them up out of yourself and you say it out loud, it gets a lot more obvious, like how illogical it is and like how this is clearly some emotional wounding. Like there's some weird rationale going on here. And that doesn't make it bad or wrong, but there's, it's leaving it in my head. It's like then it just spins. And so I have to journal, I have to talk to people, I have to like get it up out of myself so I can like live it out enough to where I can transcend that fear or befriend the fear, like okay, so what if everybody did know that I'm a little kinky and I want this and this? Like what if that was on the front page of the New York Times? Like am I hurting anyone? Have I done anything wrong? Is this immoral? No. I don't I don't think so.
Right.
But that's like kind of where I'm at in the process of like turning my head into a safe space for my sexuality. So I'm glad you talked to that as far as like how to ease your way in. Like that's right where I'm at.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I appreciate you sharing that, and it's really interesting actually when you were talking about that. It immediately made me start to think about, in the previous section of what we were talking about with how we segment trauma and how we try to differentiate between different traumas, and we kind of try to separate each other from like we try to separate from each other through our pain, right? We're like, our pain is our pain and nobody understands it, right? And we assume that, and it doesn't allow for anyone to give us that understanding that we do crave. And I think we do that also in subtle ways with our sexuality, right? When you think about it from that perspective of, well, I would be really scared if somebody saw it on the front page of a newspaper. Like if the New York Times posted that on on there, I would be terrified to see my sexual desires there next to my face. And
Next to my face.
it's right. Oh no. But it's so interesting because like you said, there's nothing actually wrong with it, and you would be shocked at how, I mean, well, to tie it all back together, look at how many people, and I don't mean this as a flex at all, but like look at how many people are watching 18 plus tarot readings,
Yeah.
right? We all are wanting that intimate part. We crave that intimacy. We do, even if we push it away. And we forget how much we connect with people in that way, right? We see it with the collective and how, there's three piles and, everybody is connecting with one of those three piles, and there are thousands of people watching it, thousands of people that have the same exact kink as you, right? That have the same kind of desire, that have the same kind of fantasy. And when we start to really recognize that, and we let our ego kind of, we push it aside for a second, we're acknowledging it, but we're also being like, but here's my counter argument to that. Yeah, it creates that extra bit of safety, I guess, for us. And I think pushes against that narrative that the ego is trying to utilize so that we do feel, I guess, separated, that really is a fear of intimacy in moments. Like, we're afraid to be a lot of the time intimate with ourselves, and we're afraid to be intimate with others because we are so afraid that we're going to get rejected. It's the most painful thing that we as humans feel. It's one of the main triggers that people try to avoid, right? So
the pain of social rejection.
Yeah.
It motivates so many things on our planet. I am certain of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And that's where, again, I go back to like pain avoidance. If you're like avoiding pain and therefore you have to avoid social rejection, like that's just such a fucking like teeny tiny little box that you get to live in then.
Mm-hmm.
And I joke, but I also am being wholeheartedly serious that like I am healing a codependent relationship with the whole entire world. Like I'm so trying to keep everybody happy and like nobody be mad at me and nobody think I'm bad or a monster. Like, don't think that. And such a small little box.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think like where we are as a collective, like at this time, the energy of our leading edge is like, no, but what if you could feel more safe? And what if, that extra little bit of safety lets something else like bubble up? And what I know about my own desires, and I wonder how relatable this is, I got to think this is part of how they work. It's like once you catch a glimpse of them, once you sniff it just even a little bit, like good luck getting that out of your head. Like good luck not healing through the shit, keeping you apart from whatever that experience is. So I feel like a lot of us have this like carrot out in front right now of like this sexual fantasy that you are like stoking the fires up big time. Thank you for that. And it's getting us to heal a lot of things that like, I've been on a healing journey for a long time and barely scratching the surface of this whole arena. So I love that you mentioned your Venus and Taurus in the eighth house. I feel like that makes a lot of sense. Um, as far as like Venus being like, how do we reach equilibrium?
Mm-hmm.
And like the eighth house being sex, death, and fear. And like you're just pretty comfortable over there. You're like, this isn't so bad. This is okay. I can
This
handle
is this is fine. No, just
it's impressive.
oh well,
It
thank
is,
you.
I think. I don't know. I tend to be a very terrified person, like just on the regular. And fear is like one of those teachers that like just kind of my ride or die teacher, fear and
Mm.
guilt. Like they spend my life with me and a couple of soulmates for me to learn from. And you have a courageousness, especially in an area that like, really terrifies me, that makes it that much more noticeable that yeah, like the way you can play in that area, it's like I can barely play anywhere, let alone in a place like that. So I find it fascinating. And I wonder if there's any other like turning point, I'm sure there are turning point experiences that like come to mind as far as like what you said, like there was a part where kind of the hero's journey, like the part at the beginning where it's darkness and like the real you is kind of locked away and it's not safe. And then you start to feel that version come online. And now where you're at, like are there specific, like, kind of unlocking type experiences that come to mind that helped you to embody who you are now and kind of who you're becoming?
Yeah, so there definitely have been. Are you asking from, just to clarify, just in general or within, I guess, the 18 plus sexual arena?
Both,
Both.
all of the
Okay.
above. Yeah.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are definitely, I guess, major turning points for me. So I guess to start sexually for me, even though I have always felt a semblance of comfort with that, I definitely, like I said, I mean, there have definitely been moments where I have thought about, okay, it's weird or it's wrong that I desire this specific thing. And I feel like for me, a major turning point with that was honestly getting into dance. Specifically, I did burlesque for a little bit. And yeah, and so it was a lot of fun, but it was very, very freeing for me with my body and with my sexuality. It made me honestly, even as comfortable as I thought I was at that point in my life, I was shocked at how at the discomfort that I would feel about certain things. Like I had no idea that some of those things were locked away in me. Like I didn't know that I felt certain shame over exposing like parts of my body. And it just got me much more comfortable than I ever would have imagined. So that was a major, major turning point for me, I guess, with my sexuality. And it opened me up to people who guided me through that. Even there were incredible performers that I worked with that were so free with their sexuality, with their sensuality, and honestly they really helped, I guess, guide and mold me into somebody that can, very openly talk about sexual experiences and 18 plus stuff on the internet at this
Yeah.
point. Just
Yeah. So gracefully. That actually is a question that I really wanted to ask somebody, and you just said the perfect opening. Is like, what do you think is the difference between sensuality and sexuality?
yeah, so for me, it's a really subtle difference, right? But I feel like with sensuality, I feel like it has more to do with how we are uh, geared towards expressing ourselves, I guess, in a sexual way. It's sort of the vehicle for sexuality, if that makes sense. But I feel like they're connected. So I feel like sensuality is how comfortable we feel in our bodies and expressing, our desires to the outside world. Sexuality, I feel like, is something that is very sacred and it's a part of just our core being. It's a part of ourselves. It's for ourselves. And we can share that with whoever we want. But I feel like there is that slight distinction where sensuality almost feels like the lens of sexuality to me specifically.
Hmm. That is so interesting. And as you say that, I'm like, wow, yeah, the sensuality side is just as repressed as the sexuality side, you know? Like, how,
Mhm.
okay, so how did you get into burlesque? Like, how does one come to just be into burlesque for a little bit? That's awesome.
I yeah, I've always been uh into dance. I wanted to be able to move my body. I've always been somebody that's been very connected to my body. That Venus and Taurus, I have Mars and Virgo in the 12th house, that Piscean energy with Virgo of needing that fluidity. So dance was always a vehicle of sorts for me that allowed for me to express my sensuality. I just always felt beautiful. I felt good whenever I would be dancing. And I was always drawn to burlesque. I thought it was so interesting, but I I would subtly do this. I would be like, "Oh, I can't do it because I have these things going on." But I was scared for a long time. That's actually what it was. I was very nervous about exposing myself, quite literally, to people in that way. And I decided to take a leap of faith, and I was teaching ballroom for a while, and then the studio that I was working at closed down, and there was an open casting call after my birthday. And I decided to go and try out. I was like, I've been dancing for years. I'll just go and do what I do, and if they like it, great. It's very much that what's meant for me isn't gonna miss me kind of idea. So I went, I did it, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. It was a totally different kind of creative element. I got to create costumes and things like that. Just different skill sets that I never would have probably acquired if I had not ended up in that space. And it was lovely. I enjoyed every single aspect of it, and I highly recommend people just taking a burlesque class. It's so freeing. It is so freeing. Like pole dancing, burlesque, all that stuff. Like really getting in touch with, that sensuality, expressing yourself through your body the way that we're all meant to. We're all meant to. We all want to feel that, right? Like you look at a burlesque dancer, you look at a pole dancer, and I mean, I know for myself, like I have always admired that, and I've wanted to be that kind of person that could express myself in that way. And it was really empowering to be able to do that. So
I'll bet. Oh, I agree. Like when you look at them, they look so free. And I want, but then I'm like you, I'm like, oh no, I'm too busy, or that's not really me, or like whatever your ego's gonna tell you. Absolutely. Oh, so like you said, casting call, was it like a show? Like a
so oh, sorry, I
no,
didn't
no,
mean
no,
to
go
interrupt.
ahead.
It's a show, but it was also a burlesque troupe. So we did, yeah, different, yeah.
Great. I've never even heard of such a thing. I love it.
Yeah. So yeah, we had our burlesque troupe. So we had our dancers and our specialties, meaning specialties being people who can, do aerial and pole and stuff like that. So fire, yeah, all of that kind of fun.
There's so many talented people out there doing so many crazy things that like,
Tell me
dude,
about it.
oh my gosh, self-expression. It's absolutely so amazing. Um, Burlesque Troop. So how long were you in that? How long did you?
So I was in that for what, a little over a year. It was a lot of fun. I had a great time, and yeah, yeah, it was a great experience. Like I said, I highly recommend to anyone that I meet, that wants to embrace their sensuality to just take a look for a burlesque class or even a pole dancing class. I think like if you can afford to do that, it's something that it is so freeing, truly. And it's so non-judgmental. Like the people that are there teaching you, working with you, I've taken a couple of classes, and at every place I walk away just feeling so in love with myself because of the people that guided me. Like they allowed for me to feel that. They cultivated that space, and I think that it's absolutely wonderful. So
Well, I'm definitely going to Google, if there's burlesque classes out here in the sticks, maybe I can find one. Um, oh my gosh, yeah, that like idea never even occurred to me, and it's definitely on my list at this point. What else? Like, what else would you recommend to kind of awaken your sensuality, your sexuality? Any other places to lean into similar to that that could help?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I have always been really into yoga, which I'm not gonna, I mean, I don't think it's necessarily, it hasn't been said before, but I think yoga is another, it's something you can do at home. It is a great way to drop into your body, to drop into that Taurus type of energy, that Empress Venus kind of energy, where you are just connecting your spirituality, your sexuality with your body in a way. And you can actually even look up yoga practices that are for Kundalini purposes specifically. So for that sexual awakening. And, it's great. There are so many people lovely people who do this on YouTube for free that will help guide you through an experience like that. But I also honestly, I know it sounds silly, but something that I've always done is to connect with my sensuality specifically is just turning on music. And again, it's going to feel uncomfortable and weird at first, but doing somatic movement, doing some kind of dance, like if it's just rocking your hips or your pelvis like back and forth, like just like getting comfortable with those parts of yourselves, because that does help awaken that sensuality in you. It's a primal part of us, and we ignore it so much. You know, we hold so much tension in our hips, especially like people who have maybe a blocked feminine energy, or they're scared of their like feminine energy or more receptive energy. Like that hip block is, it's no joke. It happens, you know, and I think just moving your hips back and forth, like dancing to music in the comfort of your own home. Like you don't have to leave. You can just, you know, you can shut the blinds. No neighbors have to be alerted. Like you don't have to get in front of the window, but you can if you would like to. I would love to see that show. And you can do that. And it's a great way to connect with your sensuality, and it's totally free and it's freeing as well. And it might make you giggle and feel silly at first, and that's good too. Like you should laugh with your sexuality. Like I'm a big proponent on my channel, obviously, of, you know, the reason that I laugh through my 18+ readings is because I'm like, there is this sort of a reference, there's a goofiness that we feel when we have that sexual experience with ourselves and with others. Like, you know, sometimes it feels silly and it's okay. Like let that ride, you know? So yeah.
Oh my gosh. And like I'm having this whole thing in my head as you're talking of like what even is silliness, of like thinking that something is silly, because like growling is one that you mentioned sometimes. You're like, oh, they want to growl at you or they want you to growl at them. And I'm like, yeah, I growl. I just can't help it. Like even in a non-sexual way. Like
Mm.
I mean, I'm pretty sure that I'm an animal and like growls just come out sometimes. And like that's one where I'll do it and then I like immediately judge it as like silly, or like, oh, that was too much, or like reel it back in, Carly, or like whatever it is. And those ideas and sexuality are just like oil and water. Like it's like dumping water on the flame. Um,
Mm.
like no, like the letting it come through in the way that's natural and not questioning it or seeing it through like our cultured conditioned lens that says like that's not civil behavior, you shouldn't bite somebody or whatever. And I'm like, but what if I
Mm.
want to? What if like what if that's like you know,
Yeah.
why not? I don't see why it's bad, except like we have these ideas that then like you almost can't, I almost can't help but observe myself and like have this commentary while I'm trying to like be in my body and like be natural. So I think all the things that you're saying definitely make a lot of sense as far as getting more and more and more comfortable just even being in that space and like cultivating a space of non-judgment between me and me for whatever wants to come through, like whatever expression wants to come through. Like I don't like, it's like aggressive sometimes. And I'm like, oh no, I can't be aggressive. Like it's like, oh gosh, it's such a shadow thing of like there's so many pieces of it that when I look at it through my conditioned mind, I see it as too much. Like those
Mm.
words specifically are really triggering for me because I've been told that on lots of different levels before. Um, but that yeah, like acceptance, like self-acceptance feels like it's at the core of healing this sexual shame and coming more fully into that part of myself. And that makes sense as far as why my healing journey has, you know, been going on. It's not like I've been sitting around not doing anything, like accepting so many different pieces of myself such that my self acceptance muscles are now big enough to come here. And
Mhm.
they're not quite big enough yet, frankly, to accept all of this. But again, I'm standing in the arena, I'm here. and with my little baby muscles, and we're doing it. We're gonna awkwardly dance our way into it, and it's gonna be great. We're gonna growl, we're gonna bite, and we're not gonna judge ourselves as much as possible, even though I try not to judge myself for judging myself. You know, it's like one of those like the mirrors are facing each other and it just goes back for a million. Yeah, yeah. So that was a lot, but
No, it wasn't too much. It wasn't a lot at all. You're expressing yourself. No, but I mean that. And I think so many people are told that they are too much, that their needs are too much, that the things that the way they express themselves is too much. And it's like, what does that, when you break that down to yourself, what does that even mean? You know what I mean? Like, how can I be too much? I'm being myself. I'm not too much, right? Like, you are not too much, like, ever, right?
that's like
Ever.
medicine. Thing your eyes just did. It was like medicine. You're like, believe me when I tell you, you're not too much. And I do. And you're right. Like, what does it even mean? Too much for who? Too
Right.
much for what? Like,
Hmm.
it's relative, you know, like that, it's subjective.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. I'm glad that you're in the arena though, and that you are, self-acceptance is it's a lifelong journey, right? And
absolutely.
yeah, I'm proud of the progress that you have, made. That it's very obvious the way that you carry yourself. There is self-acceptance there. And it's very inspiring to see. I know that you you kid with yourself and you make jokes and stuff about how the sexuality is the thing that you are most scared of. But even just being able to say that out loud, you are already building incredible muscles for that. Because, when we're really, really scared and we're really like, oh, sexuality is something I can't even talk about, like that's a hard one, right? But you are at least through that part, you are at least through the gates,
Yeah,
which is so exciting. And I'm excited for your journey with your sexuality, right? With your sensuality.
I know. Two different things. Subtle, but I feel very drawn to like figuring out the difference because on like as I'm sitting here, what I'm hearing is like the sensuality is much more repressed than the sexuality. And again, I don't even know the freaking difference other than what you just explained, which definitely tracked. But like, yeah, like I think the way you explained it, where sensuality is more the expression, it makes me wonder, and maybe probably it's different for everybody, but for me, it's like, I don't even know if necessarily my sexuality has been repressed so much as my sensuality, the expression of my sexuality has absolutely been severed,
Mhm.
but it's there. I mean, my sex drive, it's not like it just wasn't there. It just
Sure.
was very under wraps and like had like I heard somebody say like, drinking the ocean through a straw kind of thing instead of like freaking swimming in it. And I was like, yeah, that's basically what I got going on here. But to your point, yeah, like, celebrating the beginning stages of something new coming online is something I'm very passionate about because, like what you said, self acceptance is a lifelong journey. So
Mhm.
if I'm only going to be happy when I, have my sexuality figured out, it's like, yeah, but there's going to be something else after that. And then there's going to be another thing and another thing. So being in the joy of this is coming together. And there are people like you and like a lot of other people who are popping up right now in this like sex magic kind of place. Are you
Mhm.
familiar with sex magic? Do you have
I am,
background there?
yeah, I have some background. I'm by no means an expert, but yes, I do have some background on sex magic and some of the people that are in that space. And I think that they are absolutely incredible for what they do.
Who are the ones that you've become aware of?
So I like mostly I will say it's not so much people online. I've actually talked with people in my community that are part of sex magic. So there are a couple of shops basically near me who actually will do tarot readings, who are, small businesses that are open for different kinds of healing, whether it's Reiki or sexual healing like that.
Mhm.
Sex magic in general, creating different uh potions of sorts, or elixirs, things like that. And they are all of them have been just absolutely incredible. I love going to these shops and just picking their brains. But I have not actually like searched that on YouTube as much. I'm not super aware of the people in that space, but I know that from what I have heard, that it has been like kind of cropping up just from people in like some of my comment sections asking, can you do something like that? So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's like, your readings finding me, these other podcast episodes are finding me. And um, I'll link a couple examples of the ones that have been especially activating, like down in the description for anybody else who's like on this journey and is wanting activated in that way. Let me warn you, it's not for the faint of heart, because I feel like our sexuality is at the core of ourselves and our power. Like,
mhm.
to be divorced from your sexuality or your sensuality, we'll figure that out later, but to be divorced from it is a huge chunk of our power being offline. And part of the healing that I'm feeling, yes, I'm healing my sexuality, but what's really having to happen, I think, is that like I have to be able to hold more of my power. I'm not like, since that's been so cut off, it's such a huge source of our power. I haven't had it like flowing all through me and like really lighting me up. And now that it's coming more online, and you think about like saying these things out loud, or like even thinking about coming here to have this conversation was like, this is leading edge for me. Um, like it takes a level of power and confidence and self resourcing, like that stamina inside of myself to face the thing that scares me and to hold myself through that process. Um, your content and several others have been, like you said, like kind of guiding me through that process. And that's like the age that we live in, where it is so much more open, and there are people who are talking about these things and helping each other and sharing vulnerably and all of that. And yeah, I'm so grateful that you're in this space and others, and that the universe brings us the connections that we're like ready for when we're ready for them. It makes me very curious, like, what's on your leading edge at this moment? Like, what is the universe bringing to you for your development purposes?
Well, I am open to whatever it is bringing to me,
Uh-huh.
but as far as I guess things that I've been that have been on my periphery, that I've been standing on the precipice of, is honestly just sort of similar things to what we've talked about today. It's cultivating more self-love and self-acceptance. This channel that I've created in just the last few months, like I never ever would have thought, if you had seen me 6 months ago and you had asked me, are you like, would you ever create a tarot channel? I'd be like, no. I would have been so scared. So, cultivating that self acceptance and that confidence has been something that honestly the universe has been bringing to me in a lot of ways. I've been getting so many downloads for the last, I would say, year, really, that something big was on the horizon, and that I just needed to take that leap of faith to put out my work. To, what's it going to hurt to just put that out there? Either people are going to watch it or they're not. Either like people that it's meant for, it's going to find them. And I had to learn how to trust not just the universe but myself, and being able to do that. So that's been, I guess, my leading edge, is learning how to trust myself through this process, which has been really beautiful.
Yeah. And I love how you say, like, what's it gonna hurt? Like I have that fear as one of my main ones of like, I don't want to hurt anybody. I don't want to cause harm. Like as a deeply empathic person, like you're hurting yourself when you hurt somebody else. So like, no, I don't want to cause ripple effects of pain if I can avoid it. And then I figure out that like, yeah, I'm leaving myself in a little teeny box, not letting myself like branch out and express myself. So again, I just have to reflect and applaud the courage that it takes to put yourself out there, even even if you know you're not hurting anybody, and even if you know, like, I'm trying to love and I'm trying to help, like, it's still so scary. And like I was saying to you before we started recording, like, what's it like to upload a video that then 100,000 people like want to just like hop right on it and see what you're talking about? And the comments, I mean, hundreds, thousands of comments, like you reply to almost all of them too, which is just like, dude, like what is all that like? It's awesome. And what's it really like? Not from the outside, but from the inside.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And, it's honestly, it's really humbling to see a video take off like that because again, I had no expectations. I really, I've been trying this thing in my life where I am deleting expectations as much as I can because I think when we erase that part of our programming is and it's hard and it's I would say nigh impossible to get rid of it because we're humans. We're going to naturally do that. Um but when we try to ease up on that of, well, I have to get this many views or this many followers, or I have to have this, and like I expect this because I've put in this amount of work, it leaves so little for the universe to actually usher in for us, right? We don't realize how limiting we are. The universe is so, it's infinite. We can't even we can't imagine the things that it actually can bring in for us. So when we leave that space open for it, it can fill us in a way that we had no idea we could be filled, right? Like whether it's with joy or love or success, whatever it is, abundance in all forms. That's part of why I'm always drawn to the Empress card. The Empress card talks about this idea, and I promise this all connects. And the Empress is this idea of being able to accept that you are a vessel that is big enough to be filled with whatever it is that you desire, because so often we think we are much smaller than we are. We try to make ourselves so small, like and we do it in subtle ways. But yeah, when we have those very severe rigid expectations, we're actually doing ourselves a disservice. So in any case, I definitely was not expecting to have that many views on an 18 plus reading of all things, but I definitely just didn't know that is something that the collective even really needed. I thought, it'll be fun for some people maybe, and I hope that people like it. I really hope it benefits them in some way, because that's always the goal, right? Is to try to help people on their journey. But when I saw that many people needed it, I was just so surprised by the universe at that point of like, whoa, what? What just happened? But it was enlightening. I love seeing everybody's comments. I love reading them. I do read all of them. I always do take the time to read, to reply, not because I am trying to like get brownie points from anybody, but because I genuinely want to let people know that they matter. I feel like in a world where we often feel invisible, I think it's just really nice in moments to really I try really hard to make everybody feel seen and like they are an integral part of my channel, because they really are. And so, I want to acknowledge what they're saying to me, the things that they're sharing with me, because the internet's a scary place, right? Like I think what you are doing is beautiful. You're putting your content out there, you're talking to people. Like it's not easy to do that. It's not easy to do that as a creator. It's not easy to do that as just a person commenting on a video.
Mm-hmm.
And I always want to let people know that, that I do thank them for watching. I thank them for sharing, because I know that's not easy. It's not easy to put yourself out there like that. And even if it's just to say, hey, I chose pile 4, I'm like, hey, you did it. Like, thank you for letting me know. Like I'm so excited for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
You go, Glen Coco. No, but I'm just teasing.
Oh, the
But
references. You're like the queen of references. It's so good.
oh, all the rep.
Yeah, they're just peppered in throughout. I'm like, oh my God, old Craig. Oh my God, like whatever, like pulling them out. We grew up like close enough to the same time where, yeah, like pretty much all of them that you do lands, and just makes it that much more fun and relatable, and yeah, more to connect in with. Um, what have been, or maybe there haven't been, any like challenging parts, like surprisingly difficult parts of your journey as Lotus Style Tarot so far?
Yeah, so with Lotus Tile Tarot, definitely one of the most difficult things for me personally was uh so I would say a couple of things. So for one thing, not getting, because I can be very much perfectionist, right? It's part of my imposter syndrome. I'm, if you know things about MBTI types, I'm an INFJ. So there's just this natural part of me that wants to be, um, you know, perfect in any way that I can be. And really it's because I'm holding myself to such a high standard to try to help people. Like I don't want to ever let anybody down. And
Mm.
anytime I feel like I've, and it happens, right? There will be times where, you know, people are upset with a reading, or they don't feel like it resonated with them, or they're being people, right? And that can be really, really, I mean, yeah, right? Like they're just going to be people are going to people. But
Yeah.
I- that was really hard for me because it's that little box that you put yourself in. You're like, I don't want to hurt anybody, I don't want to let anybody down. And when you hear that from someone, it really shook me at first to see that kind of feedback from it's such a small drop in the ocean, right? But it does happen. And learning how to navigate that for myself, honestly, you talk about like muscle building. That was such a workout for me. And so I'm really grateful that it has happened. But it was definitely, I would say, the hardest part of the journey was learning that you're not going to ever please everybody. Like you can't be perfect, and you can't hold yourself to that kind of standard because you will burn yourself out, which, for a little bit of my journey, I started to get really scared that I was burning myself out, and I was lighting myself up to keep others warm. And I started noticing that. And uh, it was great because it was a check for myself that, oh wow, there's more healing that needs to be done here, there's more acceptance that needs to be given here to myself. So it was a growth moment, and that, you can never have enough of those in your life. So
I don't think so, but um, yeah, I would imagine like, having your videos be popular on YouTube is, I would say, probably best case scenario. But at the same time, if all I have to do is make a video and upload it, and there's like 100,000 people getting a message that they need to hear, how the hell do you ever like get yourself to take a day off? How do you get yourself to like rest and play and just for fun? Like when you know that there's that many people, maybe not counting on you, but definitely being uplifted by you. Like you said, kind of like there are people warming themselves on your fire. So how do you take your fire and like go off on your day off sometimes? Like, is that challenging?
absolutely, absolutely. And I absolutely love being there for people. It's my favorite thing, right? It's the thing that lights me up. It brings me so much joy to just be there for somebody else. It's the consummate INFJ thing,
Yeah.
right? It's that Jism. And so I I'm so grateful, and I know that the blessings that I have, I never want to act like, it's not a big deal, because it absolutely is. And I, again, like I cannot impart enough how much everybody does mean to me on that channel. But it was very hard for me because of that to take days off. And that was when I started to burn myself out. I was, just tethered to this idea that I had to pump out content all the time because people need me. And I have to like be there for everybody, and I have to grow my channel. And I was like, what am I doing? Like I finally had this realization. I actually started, having like panic attacks. I was having a lot of anxiety, and uh, I would have like weird heart palpitations and flutters, and my body was letting me know, right? It's so interesting how your body is always the thing that you can pay attention to. I was having like stomach upset, just feeling very sick. And I started realizing, oh my gosh, it's because I'm I am taking for granted the gift that the universe is giving me, and I'm not I'm not honoring myself in this moment and balancing, right? It's that, it always goes back to tarot for me, but it's that Two of Pentacles energy where it's on the Rider-Waite deck, it's the man holding the two coins, one up and one down. And it's symbolizing getting overwhelmed easily, right? Like you're trying to do too many things, but it can also be, you know, that's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it is it's learning how to balance all the things that you do, because we will never not be busy as humans. Like it's just at this point in society, we all have so many things going on. We're constantly bombarded with texts, with emails, with calls, whatever. Like we're so connected, and it's a beautiful thing. But it's also something that we have to learn how to balance for ourselves to keep ourselves from getting fatigued, learning how to take days off, learning how to have work-life balance, as above, so below kind of energy, right? Like you have to learn how to honor yourself as the gift that you truly are to the world. And that can feel so weird, right? Like to think that way. For me, I'm always I'm pre-programmed to think about others first, right? And to think about myself first almost feels bad. It feels like a sin in a way. And I've had to work really, really hard on not shaming myself through that, right? It's that no judgment zone, and being like, I need this day off. I need a day to go on my walk, to go on my run, to be in nature so that I can be stronger for the next video that I post,
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and like you said, like, I think it's that much harder when this is your favorite place to be. Like, this is my favorite. I love doing this, I mean, it's one thing when your shitty job is burning you out and you're so resentful because like if it wasn't for that place, then I'd be fine. Dude, I've burnt myself out harder on my spiritual path, on my spiritual work, than any boss has ever gotten me to work so hard for their company. Like, dude, I think we can really lose ourselves in I want to help. I want to use my time and my life force to create an uplifting impact that helps other people feel even just like 1% better in their day. Like that too is where I just find so much satisfaction. And then it comes time to crash or rest or like whatever is needed to like refill the tank. And yeah, then you start looking at like, I don't know, I feel like it's kind of the um I had to stop looking at my like my dashboard, my analytics page on my channel. Like a few weeks ago, I just said like I'm gonna delete this out of my life, like you said about deleting expectations. I'm gonna just delete this habit of even looking at the numbers because who the fuck cares? Like no matter what the numbers are doing, doesn't change if I have energy to make a video right now. Like it doesn't matter that like, oh, the views are falling off a cliff. So nobody needs me right now. Okay. I'm going to go underground and like do my rest thing, and that's going to be fine. And like you said, like when I emerge, I'm going to come out more together. And maybe that's what people really need. They need an example of what it looks like to value yourself apart from what it is that you're giving to the world. Like I feel like especially as women, we can be very programmed to like judge your value by how much you're helping or how much you're caring, how much you're giving. And it's not wrong. I mean, it's what we grew up with, a lot of us, and that's kind of the starting point. But then yeah, like what happens when you're doing the work that like I would show up and I would do this all day every day for free because I love it, but the body can't roll with that. Like the body needs a day off. The body needs the time in nature, needs the exercise, needs the good food. Yeah, I mean, the balance there, the Two of Pentacles, like you said, like it's like a magic trick, essentially. And every time you get it, the universe is like, oh, here, how about, instead of $15,000 or 15,000 subscribers, how about 200,000 subscribers? Now how easy is it to rest, Like it's just like every time you get the muscles, then it's like, here's the next thing, kind of drawing you deeper in. And how much of that inner resource do you have? built up inside of you, and can you keep built up inside of you even when the world and the demands of life are never subsiding? They're just always there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I love the fact that you touched on a point of, especially with women, but I mean, just people in general, like, and I don't mean like women are definitely programmed, I would say, exactly in the way you were talking about in society, very heavily of measuring their self-worth with, well, how do you nurture and take care of others? Because that's your primary function, right? And I feel like people in general, outside of just even women, I feel like we are constantly having our boundaries tested. We're constantly told that we shouldn't have boundaries, that we should just give and give and give of ourselves energetically and otherwise, right? And it does take an incredible amount of resilience and self-discipline to have those boundaries, especially because you're going against what society has conditioned you to be, I feel like, at that point. And that's really, really difficult. Because yeah, like you said, like you see those numbers rise, and oh my gosh, I totally get not wanting to look at that dashboard. It's just the bane of my, like,
Yeah.
I felt like I was very tethered to that. And when I would see those numbers rise, it would make my heart race and stuff. Just like seeing that or seeing things plummet, I would be just constantly judging myself based off of that. That was my measure of how good I'm doing. Like, am I good enough? It's like, well, why is that a measure at all? A measuring stick of how my worth, right? It's so sneaky. I'm like, no, right?
Yeah. Well, and it's fun to look at in some ways,
Yeah.
like anything. I don't think anything in the earth realm is good or bad. It's all how much dosage are you giving yourself of it. And
Mm-hmm.
when I had to, decide that, like, okay, that's enough with the habit of like looking at the dashboard, and like, for those who don't know, the stats, a lot of them, there's a couple that are real time, but most of them only update once a day. And I'm logging in there looking at it like a couple times a day. Like, it's not even new information. Like, why are you looking at it again? And it's like, what does this change? What does this information tell you? Like, how does this, like you said, like, why is this a guide? Why am I like sourcing information from this place at all? Like, what does it actually guide me to do differently? Nothing. But sometimes it does trigger me to feel pretty shitty about
Mm-hmm.
myself. But usually it's not good news. Like, it's either neutral or bad. And like, why do I keep coming here?
Mm-hmm.
Do this. What is that?
Exactly. Exactly. I 100% agree. And yeah, it's so interesting that we feel programmed to do something like that. And I think sometimes it is to, well, like I said, to fulfill this need that like societal constructs put on us of, well, you have to constantly be working, you have to constantly be giving to other people. You want to be a good person, that's what good people do. And it's like, yes, that is part of what good people do, but good people also give to themselves. Like, good people know how to balance that. And I think that that is probably one of the hardest lessons that I've learned, and I would imagine it's probably one of the hardest lessons for many people, just because it does go against the grain of, well, how we're programmed naturally, right? That's why we feel the need to look at a dashboard or, our stats on social media in general. Just, the fact that that's our measuring stick of self-worth it's really crippling for us. It's not that it's like not a great thing, like to have those numbers. It can be good, right? Nothing is in the universe usually is good or bad. Like,
Mhm. You
it's
can
a bit of
overdose on pretty much anything.
right,
Even the
right.
best
But
stuff, you can overdose on it. And
exactly.
yeah. Yeah. And I think, yeah, like, it's so normal. It's such a sign of the times is what came through when you said, like the fact that we use this as our measuring stick, like, I don't want any of us to feel victim of like this social media or whatever. Like, kind of the older generations usually more than like us, but they're like, it's ruining this generation, and this blah blah blah. I'm like, okay, so before there was social media, there was like the town gossip who's over
Mhm.
here talking about like, well, so and so, she's 26 and she's not even married yet. Like that was their measuring stick. It's not like, oh, now there's this awful measuring stick and there wasn't before. It's like, no, it
No.
just looks different now. So judging yourself compared to what culture and what society is doing, like, I don't think that's new, like
No.
necessarily. Like the fact that we use social media and the internet now, like our community, our town gossip, it's like now there's tea channels or whatever instead of like, mm, yeah, if you spend any time on YouTube at this point, there's a creator on there who's like having a downfall, which seems like every couple weeks there's like a different downfall happening. But like that that entire illusion is what I'm going to call it, is like part of how social media and what used to be the town gossip, like how it terrorizes us. It's like that front page of the newspaper test of like, what if this was on the front page of the newspaper and everybody saw it? And I think that like the YouTube basically is a way for people to work out their fears around
Mhm.
being seen for who they really are. And sometimes the shit's got to hit the fan. And then you see clearly that like, yeah, they were mad and they said I'm bad and blah blah blah, like, but it doesn't change who I am. Like I think through that experience you would learn that like, wow, like even though there's millions of people hating on me, like it doesn't, I mean, I'm still here in my house, I'm still eating this sandwich, my cat is still right there, like, in real life, like you're pretty much fine even with online hate. But I have more of the experience of what you described, where like even one little comment is like a 2-day process of like pulling
Oh,
myself up out of it. And thank God there have only been like 3 of those ever in my history of like, yeah, I'm not healed enough for the like full on version, but I do think there's like a reflective nature to the internet that is so interesting to me, that shows you almost like your own personal worst case scenario. And for
mhm.
some people, that's blowing up. And for other people, it's not blowing up. And for some people, it's blowing up and being loved and then falling down. And like, there's all of these different ways where we think that there's some creators who are like having their dreams come true or whatever. But what if we're all being shown like our worst possible fears?
Oh, yes. Mhm. 100% agree. I feel like as a YouTube creator, as a creator on any of the social media platforms, right? Like I think that is it's a dream, but it's also the biggest fear, right? Like blowing up sounds like it would be great, but I think it comes with, again, there's that negative and positive effect of that. And yeah, I feel like there are definitely fears within that. I feel anyway,
Yeah.
like that's been at least the biggest hurdle for me is, gaining the amount of momentum that my channel did. I was petrified of that for the first couple of months. And I still deal with that every once in a while, where I just feel that imposter syndrome creep up, or just, yeah, just really scared of, oh my gosh, what if I'm not who people think I am? Which I'm like, what? Like that's such an interesting concept when you really break that down. But I always,
Break it down a little. What do you see?
so whenever I break that down to myself, yeah, I get scared that I'm not as great of a person as people think that I am, or my gift isn't real, or I go through that. I go through that all the time, because I think we're all kind of programmed and conditioned to be our worst critic. There's a reason that expression exists. We're our own worst critic, and I'm definitely one of mine. So that's why those negative comments can hurt, right? Like, because it sometimes will highlight, and it's why it's a beautiful thing, because for me, the way that I spin it for myself and how I'm able to get through it is through a lot of tears and ice cream. No, but there is some crying and some pep talking in the mirror, but it's also me being able to recognize, like, well, what about that do I think is true? Because I feel very triggered by it. So there's a piece of truth in that for me. And even if I know logically that it's not true, there's a part of me and my like inner child and my shadow that feels that and feels triggered by it because it's getting pointed out and it wants to hide. It's like, no, 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 we don't talk about that. Like
Exactly.
that stays behind the gate.
For a reason.
Beware.
Yeah.
But yeah, so for me, that process has been really difficult. And I think that has been at times why I have felt like, well, maybe I don't have this gift, or like maybe I'm not really helping people. Maybe I'm not as good of a person as some of these other viewers are saying that they think that I am. I'm like, what if it's not true? And it all comes from this lack mindset within myself of feeling, not good enough, of feeling shame around who I am, right? And so it's been really actually beautiful to explore that with myself, because again, that self-love, that self-healing, that self-acceptance, it's not linear. It never ends. Like, we will continue it into our following lifetimes if you believe in that. I certainly do. And I feel like, we continue to learn these lessons over and over and over again until we've mastered them, and sometimes that doesn't happen in this lifetime, but it's okay. We'll finish that work later, so.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. That actually like reminds me of something, of a download that I had here a few months ago, kind of before the sexual awakening, which was like, I think especially in today's culture, we have such a go, go, go mindset, like busy all the time, kind of like you were saying, and wanting to kind of just get there, like the destination, and just want to be there or whatever. And what I downloaded was actually through my astrology progressions, my secondary progressions, if you're familiar. I have my Saturn stationing direct. It's retrograde in my birth chart, and in my progressions, it stations direct when I'm in my like early 70s. And the download that came was, that's when your work takes off. And I'm like, when I'm 72, that's when my work takes off? You want me to do or like, I wanted to do my work for 7 decades before like the world really sees it and embraces it and is benefited by it. It's like that comes 7 decades later. Like, I'm barely halfway there. Not even halfway there. I'm almost 35. Is that okay? Like, is it okay that it's going to take 7 decades? Like, does that mean you don't want to do it because it's going to take so long? Like, there's almost this sense, and I wonder if you would call yourself a patient person with Venus and Taurus. That would strike me as a pretty patient placement, but I don't know, with the Gemini South Node, maybe that kind of contradicts. Yeah. It's like maybe some days you're more patient and others not so much. But yeah, like the work of healing takes our whole lifetime just to do this chapter. And then you come back and you do the next chapter for 100 years. And then you come back and you do the next, like, for some, maybe that sounds terrible. It sounds like, no, but I just want to be there already. For me, it's such a huge load off. Like, you're already doing the only thing you like ever really need to do. And you're kind of already on the path, you're already living it. And yeah, the next decades like will be more and different stuff, but like more kind of the same pattern of something rises from the shadow and you work on loving it and embracing it and integrating it, and then something else rises from the shadow, and lifetime after lifetime after lifetime, like, I don't know if is that a peaceful thought for you or agitating?
No, I find it incredibly peaceful. I have a very similar viewpoint on that. It takes so much pressure off of me personally. I'm just like, oh, that's great. Like, I can just live my life. Like, it doesn't have to be, there doesn't have to be all this pressure that we often do put on ourselves to be, we have to be remembered. We have to do this work that is so revolutionary. And it's like, well, okay, and I'm going to say this, but what does that mean? Right. And what I mean by that is it's relative, right? Like, the smallest actions can impact people in ways that we will never understand. There's a card in one of my decks. I'm sorry, it always comes back to stuff like this for me, but in the Wild Unknown deck, which a lot of tarot readers use, so most people will be aware of that deck, but there's a dolphin card. And in that deck, the dolphin is super happy. It's a water sign card, but it has like this smattering of rainbow colors behind it. And it's not like linear lines the way that the rest of the deck, a lot of the other cards have these like lines that are super straight and even across the background. The dolphin, no, it doesn't have that at all. And I feel like that is such a beautiful expression of like, just be yourself, just like, it's okay, just live your life. Like, you don't have to put all of these really harsh, rigid expectations on yourself to get things right, to be somewhere in the next 20 years, to put this time constraint on yourself. Like, we're not meant to actually exist that way, and I feel like the lesson of the dolphin really talks about that, and I think it's so beautiful. And the lesson of the dolphin is also a communication card of the dolphin doesn't even realize its own impact. It just exists, and it doesn't know that the things that it says, the way that it interacts with others, is perhaps the most revolutionary thing about it. It's actually the most important thing that it does. It's the small things that we do that has the biggest ripple effect a lot of the time. Right.
Right. Because, like, in the physical, when you're trying to hit a bullseye, it's like, how did you even pick that bullseye?
Right.
Why do you think that going to law school and being a lawyer, a doctor, like whatever it is, like, why is that the pinnacle of success? Like, some people are meant to be there and they have a real purpose for being there. But,
Yeah.
we can't use somebody else's like their path to judge our own path. And that was what was revolutionary for me, realizing that, like, it's like 7 decades worth of work just to, like, kind of get where I'm going, to
Mhm.
begin like what I'm here to do. And, like, I'm, like, honestly pretty proud of that I would sign up for a mission that is so detailed and so in depth that it would take me 70 years just to train for what I'm here to do. And I'm like, oh, that's like badass in some ways, and blows the lid off of, like, most people are retired and trying to die by that point. And I'm like, no, that's when I get started, like,
Right.
I have no, it really did take the pressure off, like you said, of like, I have no expectations at this point of, like, by the time you're 40 or by the time you're 50, like, you need to be at XYZ. Like, I mean, I can already tell you, like, it's nothing. Even if I do get somewhere cool by the time I'm 40 or 50, like, that's not the point. Like, there's this thing out here that is really where something is happening. And to be okay with that, to be okay with, like, a really long timeline. And like I said at the beginning, like, why would you rush pleasure? Why would you want to hurry? Like, it almost is you're kind of tattling on yourself a little bit when people are like, well, by the time I'm 40, I want to be here. And, like, the benchmarks that we have, it's like, are you not enjoying where you are? Like, I feel like when you're in pleasure, like when you're in the throes of passion and play and love, like, you're not trying to be like, let's wrap this up. Okay, I got places to be and places to go. Like, no, you're like, how can I cancel my lunch and my meeting so that I can stay here and keep doing this? Like, if we are enjoying ourselves, if we are finding pleasure in our day-to-day experience, I think that alone, like, takes a lot of the pressure off of, like, trying to make something happen out of it. And that's where I love these 18 plus readings for people who are recovering perfectionists or wanting to, like, make a big impact, because I think we make the biggest impact inside of ourselves. And this whole concept of pleasure and sexuality is like I know you want to have a big, I'm talking to myself, I know you want to have a big impact on the outer frontier, but like, what about this inner frontier, and like being a pioneer of that and facing what's in there and seeing what comes from that. And who knows what comes out of that? Like you said about the dolphin, like he's just playing. He doesn't know the
Mhm.
impact that he's having. Like when you're over here, like doing your sex magic or playing with your lover or spending time in your day off or whatever, like we have no idea from our physical perspective, like what the impact of that truly is,
Mhm.
like it's impossible to judge, I think, as a human, what our true impact really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. There's no way to know that, right? There really isn't. I mean, we can make uh, we can surmise all we want, but at the same time, it's it it kind of defies the whole purpose, right? You're meant to be present, even though most of us don't exist in that way, right? It's the lesson of the hermit, right? The hermit is all about, I'm holding my lantern and all I can see is what is right in front of my feet. I can't see 10 years ahead of me. I'm not looking 10 years back. I'm looking at right now because right now is pleasure, or it should be, right? Like it it can be, even like, instead of should be, it can be pleasure if I allow for it to be. Like I get to use this light that I have right now, today, and I get to use it how I want, and I get to share that with who I want, and I get to impact people, but I won't see that impact, and it's okay. Like I might never see that impact,
Oh,
and you kind of have to learn how to be okay with that.
yeah. I know that learning how to be okay with that part, I feel like I could have like a whole deep dive conversation about that alone. Um, Let me ask you this. Are you ready to wrap up, or do you want to take a bathroom break and come back?
It's up to you. I'm okay with either one. If there's more that you would like to talk about, we can.
I,
um
I would love to ask that question about the learning to be okay with it and
yeah,
being a sixth line profile in human design. I think that would
sure.
be a fun little bit more in the conversation, but I do need a potty break. So
Same, yeah.
thank you for that little break. Feel much better.
Of
Um,
course.
yeah. So, though, I do really want to ask about what you were saying about learning to be okay with never really understanding the impact that you have. And I think going back to what we were saying about if you're getting your self-worth from helping others, that's a really like impossible place to be. Is like
Mhm.
you want to be helpful and that's how you'll know you're worthy, but you never get to know if you helped or not and to what degree. So it's like I love how it's set up on one hand for like it's basically impossible to like feed yourself off of external validation, like it doesn't really ever work because you can't really know the
Mhm.
impact that you cause for people. Um, but like so I saw on I think it's on the about page of your channel where it says that you're a 6'2" in human design and a projector. Um, are you like familiar with line six
Mhm.
mythology, if you will? Like the three-stage process of like, which is kind of ambiguous and like anytime I hear people talking about it, it's kind of like all saying the same thing of like the first 30 years you're like experimenting and then you go on the roof for 20 years and then you come off the roof and now you're out there and you're a role model. And
Mhm.
this like I don't know if the role model piece is why I feel so strongly about having an impact, but I do, wherever it comes from. And number two, it does seem exactly like what you were saying about the dolphin, where it's not that you're like actively creating an impact and you're not like telling the world, like, hey, look, I'm a role model, but just the way you are is a role model and it does have impact. And so, yeah, like, do you, I asked my last guest this too, because she's a YouTuber also, as far as like, do you think about the impact that your work will have while you're creating it? Or do you find more of a pure place where like the creation is really just your energy being included? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And I love that question. That's a great question. And, you know, at first, like the first couple of videos, I felt myself being much more in the energy of thinking about like, is this going to impact how, is it going to be a good impact or am I going to hurt someone? Like, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that. Right. That's that
It's
role
bad.
model energy coming through of like, I have
Mm.
to be. But I have found after that, I started realizing that no, I need to just come at this from a really pure place of, you know, again, I am, even if people tell me that it impacted them, I'm never going to understand that fully. And so I have to put that away for myself. And I have to just be okay with, I'm going to just create because I feel called to do that by my own creative energy, which is linked to the universe, and I'm going to do that. I'm going to go towards the things that I feel most called toward. And I feel that that is, I guess it has alleviated some of that pressure for myself to try to have this impact as opposed to just allowing myself to have whatever impact I'm meant to have on someone.
Mm. Even when you hurt them, even
Even
when
when I,
they are like, this sucks and it didn't land, and like,
yep,
people are peopling, you know?
people are peopling. And actually, I read something recently that really shook me to my core on that, right? And it's so funny how the universe will put things right in front of your face when you need it the most, right? Whether it's a reader, it's, a channel about spirituality, it's a tarot deck, it's an oracle card. But I was reading this and it just, yeah, it was amazing. It was talking about how you can't you cannot ever know what kind of impact you have on somebody, and you can never be the judge of what is good and bad impact because it's not meant for you to know. So even if it feels like you had a bad impact on someone's story, and this is not to let yourself have a get out of jail free card, right? Like we know when we're doing something that we shouldn't, and like that's something we have to heal within ourselves, right? And practice forgiveness for the self and for others. But um when we hear, for instance, using this, like somebody commenting on a video and saying, I didn't like this video, it was terrible, or this ruined my entire day, like I can't believe you would say that about somebody, something like that, something to an extreme like that. It's I know this is so strange, but it was meant to be that way. And I truly like that hit me so hard because it felt true. I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like the universe is like, no, they needed to experience that because if you think about the things that trigger you the most, it is the best learning experience for you, as awful as that feels. And I do not ever mean to purposely trigger anyone. And I don't really think very many people do. But when we have that sort of stimuli, it allows for us to either explore and grow, or we keep burying it until we can't anymore, right? Eventually it will come out. And sometimes we are put on people's paths to lead them out of that darkness, even if it does feel rough for them and they lash out at us. And so that's why I'm like, even in the times when I do hurt someone at this point inadvertently with my channel, I trust that the message in some way was still meant to get to them that way. And even though that's a difficult pill for me to swallow as somebody who never wants to hurt someone like that, I think that even in itself was freeing, reading that. So
Yeah. Yeah. Because, I mean, like we said at the very beginning, like some of the most painful things that we ever go through give us the magic that we end up like sharing as our gift to the world. So I do have a story. I mean, we're in Gemini season as we're recording this, and I have a story about myself that I trigger people that like they get easily triggered around me. And I have, oh man, I've beat up on myself so much in my lifetime for that. But like you're saying, and like looking at it through that lens of like, what if that's exactly what they needed?
Right.
Like that was the uncomfortable nudge right on the painful part that they needed to heal, or whatever it was, that the impact that they needed from that. And
Mhm.
for us to like let go of needing it to look a certain way, you
Mhm.
know. Mm,
Exactly, exactly. And I love that, needing it to look a certain way in a society where, social media is a beautiful thing, right? It's a beautiful thing. It connects us in so many ways, but it also can be a scary thing for us where we feel like we have to be perfect and polished all the time, right? Like we all feel that, and we feel like things have to look a certain way, that we have to look a certain way, that we have to present ourselves in a certain way. And I feel like social media has highlighted this need to do that. It's not that social media is doing a bad thing. It's that we as people are being shown that that is already a natural part of our programming, and we have to unprogram that. Like we have to take that out of the equation, right? And so I feel like social media in and of itself is teaching us important lessons, I
mhm,
guess, if that makes
mhm.
sense.
It like exaggerates kind of our tendency to find our validation outside of
Mhm.
ourselves. And I think it sets a lot of people up to kind of fall off a cliff with that. Like I was saying about realizing like you can't survive on external validation. Like it's like eating sugar constantly. Like it's not real nutrients, like it's a hit that's small and then you crash and then you
Mhm.
need another hit. And that's a drug addict, like
Right.
no shame, no shade at all. But that's like self-medicating ourselves with these little doses of external validation. And I feel like that's so intertwined in this topic of I want to make an impact, a positive one, but even that is like you're checking what's going on around you to see, am I having the impact? Am I doing it? Am I helping? Like what's going on? Is my content, doing what I wanted it to do? But that reminds me of the prayer that I said for this episode, which I have never said anything like this, but I said, like, normally what I say is something along the lines of the people who need to hear this or who are ready to hear this, let them come, let them find it, whatever. And the part that was brand new for this episode was like, yes, bring those ones here, but go ahead and bring the ones who are ready to fight about it too. Bring the ones who are like ready to be triggered by this, who are
Mhm.
ready for the spark to poke up against something that they are ready to heal. Like if them getting mad at me or us or whatever, like if that is the part that is the impact that they're ready to receive for the highest good of their all, I'm okay with having whatever the impact is. Like let them all find it. Anybody who's ready to interact with this material in any way,
Mhm.
I'm not gonna, you know, I've been so historically protective over my content. Like I only want people who will love it to see it. And that keeps it in this teeny little box of like basically there's an invisibility cloak around my channel. And I like it that way. In a lot of ways, it's taken a lot of healing for me to be like, you know what? Like whether you love it or you hate it, hate is just another side of love. It's just lighting something up inside of you that the universe thinks you're ready to see. Your
Mhm.
higher self is ready to see this. And if it's bitter medicine as it goes down, like I'm learning to be okay with being a bitter pill sometimes. And other people find the medicine sweet. Everybody's gonna take it in their own way. But to be okay with whatever the impact looks like, that is, I gotta think that's, for me, it's been one of the biggest growth edges of putting my work out there publicly.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. And I would 100% agree with you on that.
Yeah.
It was the thing that held me back for a very long time. It wasn't like there wasn't this part of me that desired it, right? That scary desire for me. It's not a sexual thing, but it is a desire of mine that I was so ashamed of. I wouldn't let myself fantasize about it for the longest time because I didn't want to put any energy into it because I didn't feel like I deserved it, or I was scared that I couldn't make the impact that I desperately felt I had to or needed to in order to feel worthy of it. And it's like once I started healing through some of
Mhm.
those triggers for myself, those things in myself, I finally felt free enough to make that jump. And uh, I realized I need to make the impact not just on the people that are going to love on me, but this needs to be, like you said, needs to be shown to people who aren't ready yet. And for some people, they're going to have a different reaction to that. I've had people on videos be like, this was a beautiful message, but I wasn't ready to receive it yet, so I'm going to like it, but I'm going to come back to it. Just full disclosure. And I'm like, that is so powerful. Like,
Oh, good
the
for
fact
you.
that you're right, the fact that you're sharing something like that, that was so inspiring to me. I've had a couple of people do that, and I'm always so amazed by that sort of self-awareness, right? And it's not to shame anybody who is like in the other category of like, I just hate this, I hate you
Sure.
for telling me this, right?
How dare you? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
How dare you tell me about me? And it's like, and I totally get it. It's like you said, it's bitter medicine sometimes. And I've been in that place. I'm not I'm not someone that lashes out at people, and that's no shade, no to you and anybody else that does that. Everybody's programmed differently. We're programmed to protect ourselves in different ways because we all learned how to cope in different ways. But I've definitely had moments of like where I've thought to myself, like, how dare they just call me out like that? Like, oh my gosh, I was not ready for that message. But I do feel the impact later on when I'm ready to feel that impact in a positive way. And it leads to the greatest growth, right? It's like, oh yeah, they're right. Like, I totally see what they're saying now. I am like that, and I need to work on that. So,
Well, and I think another piece is being so intimate with our own triggers that you're able to see, like you said, like, yeah, it hurt in the first minute, but a week later, a month later, whenever these other dots showed up, I can see exactly why I had to go through that right there or whatever. Um, yeah, that like projection, is that a concept that you think about a lot? I am a I'm just fascinated by projection as far as like the whole concept of you put something out there, you say something, and you try so hard to like say it well in an uplifting way, and like you don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, and then someone projects onto you over the top of everything that you mean, everything that you said. They hear what they hear and they take from it what they take from it. And
mhm.
like there's a person in my real life, in my physical life, who I am the villain in their story. And they just like hate my guts, think I'm a liar, have told me to my face like that I'm a liar, I'm not capable of listening, on and on and on. And like their projection when it very first started, and this has happened a little bit through my comments too in my YouTube space, when it very first started, it really had me questioning, like, can I listen? Like, am I capable of that? Am I a liar? Wait, when did I do that? Like, really, he was so sure, like, so convinced that he was right about me and like projecting that version of like who he thinks I am, like projecting that onto me. And then, like on human design, I have an open identity center. So the wins of like what happens in my life, I'm like, I take it all and I consider it all. And it like my identity is a filter of like some stuff gets kept and some stuff like goes right back out. But like his projection, I bring this up because one, it was one of the most like upsetting and kind of scary things that like, how can he be so sure that this is who I am? Like, I'm just me, and like everybody here is like having an experience of me, and he's the only one reacting like this. Like, does he have some kind of sixth sense where he can see the monster inside me and nobody else can see? Like, is he right? Like
Mhm.
projection. Oh gosh. And then it ended up being like one of the most profoundly strengthening experiences of my life because in questioning his projection, I feel like I locked in some of my identity in a way that like wasn't there before. And I think kind of the same thing with any negative comments that I've ever gotten. Like, oh, you're mad at me because I said X, Y, and Z. And then I go back and like think about why did I say X, Y, and Z? And what did I mean by it? And what, like, how did it come across? And how do I feel about it? And then I'm like, no, I'd go back and I'd say it just like I did, like that's what I meant. That was my expression of myself in that moment. And the fact that that is so upsetting to someone and that they want to like put that back on to me, like learning to wear other people's projections and not taking them personally is, I feel like, one of the main skills of YouTube that I've been able to really gather. And I wonder, I had not thought about this before, but I wonder how does that help me in this sexuality arena? Like, oh, my partner can't perform, and now he's projecting it everywhere except for here, like, or something, like to be able to have that kind of relationship with other people's projections as I do go into such a vulnerable space where, I got to think it's so easy for people to get triggered and then want to get it out of them and project it on somebody else.
No, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you bring that up with so first of all, I'm sorry that, somebody projected like that onto you in such a negative manner. And I think the way that you've handled it is really beautiful and admirable, honestly, as well. I think it's hard to not take that projection, personally and seriously, because it makes you kind of question who you are. And when you're, most people do question who they are. Most people go through an existential crisis at least once in their life, right? So we do feel like we don't entirely know who we are, and we kind of look to the outside world to tell us that. And that can be a dangerous thing until we learn how to give that internal validation to ourselves, right? Of like, no, this is who I am. And that is a projection of the other person and their beliefs of themselves that they're putting onto me because they're seeing something in me that reminds them of themselves that they're ashamed of. A lot of the time is where it comes from. Not always, but a lot of the time that is. So, but I am, like I said, I am sorry that that happened to you,
Well,
and
it's like you said, it definitely caused me to question a lot, but by the end of it, I was even more sure-footed than I was going into it. And since then, like his and I's story hasn't completely come to an end, but there was the latest installment here a couple weeks ago, and I just was like, dude, like take it somewhere else. Like, don't peddle that shit here. I ain't buying it,
right.
Like, and so to even, yeah, it sucked, especially those first couple, but like to go through it and get to the other side where he's still projecting and I'm no longer questioning, like that's a strength that I didn't have before.
Yeah.
And that's why I like to say, like, he's one of the best soulmates I've ever manifested because he pushed me into the fire. Like I transform a lot and I go through an existential crisis like every Wednesday kind of thing. But he
Friends.
shoved me deep down into a fire that, wow, like it burned away so many of the fucks I was giving
Sure.
about what people think of me and am I doing it right? Am I saying it right? He proved to me that like people don't hear you. They hear what they can hear, They're hearing through their own lenses. And the best that you're doing is pushing on their lens and getting a message to go on in from their lens. But the message that goes in was already on the lens, like we don't actually get seen by other people. We really only see ourselves or not. And
Right.
he's who taught me that. Kind of
What
led me into it. But yeah, thank you. you know?
I know. It's like, oh, well, what a beautiful lesson. I mean, like, and a lot of the time those karmic mates, those karmic soulmates, they are sometimes the most pivotal for us, right? Or in my experience, it has definitely been that. And it sounds like in your experience too, that was a huge lesson. So, but to tie it back to, I guess the way that people project onto us even in a sexual manner, with like the more 18 plus type of stuff. It's interesting because I feel like that happens a lot more than people even like to talk about. You know, there's a lot of shaming that happens for, different practices of sexuality, different, different kinds of sensuality, whatever it is, like. And I feel like that's always a big sign that there's a part of you that is shaming yourself for that same thing, or is afraid of being like that, right? So, which is just shame, basically. And we see that a lot in, yes, and if you have like a male partner who can't perform, then you might notice that he starts projecting in different ways, or you might project your own like feelings of inadequacy onto him, right? Feeling like, well, because you can't perform, that must mean that there's something wrong with me, instead of just taking it as what it truly is, which is just sometimes like it's anatomically just, it just didn't happen, right? But it doesn't have to, it does not mean that like you are undesirable. And that is a conversation that I've had with some of my previous partners that has been probably the most revolutionary, I would say, for my own sexuality, was dealing with stuff like that specifically, and learning how to navigate a conversation like that to, create safety for myself and battle my own feelings of maybe unworthiness, or feeling like, well, because they couldn't perform, then that means that there's something inherently wrong with me. Like I'm taking all of this blame that didn't need to be there, that they weren't even putting onto me, and I'm just taking it. And why? Like, why am I doing that? And then also learning how to, so I learned how to battle with that, and not really battle, but I learned how to live and coexist with it and be like, I hear you. I understand that that is something that you feel like as my sexual side. What can I do to make you feel better? Right. And I was able to get through that on my own. And then in doing that, I realized that I was becoming a much better partner to people in those times, because, when you can't perform, it can be like one of the harshest moments of your life, I can imagine, right? Like it's like being asked to perform uh I don't know, like a musical piece that you've been practicing for years, and you're like, "Oh yeah, I can play this in my sleep. Like I've done this forever." And then like you get up in front of an audience and then you fail. And it's like that has to feel like major rejection, not just of yourself, but just from everyone. It just, and it would be like if, so a lot of the times I felt that in those moments, the person on the other end, the person that was not able to perform, what tends to happen is they will start to project onto others because they didn't get the love and acceptance that they needed in that moment, right? Because a lot of the time, the person that feels the actual rejection of, my partner couldn't perform for me, which means I'm not lovable. It's hard for them to be there for their partner who really needs them in that moment, right? And so, in learning how to mitigate that feeling in myself, I was able to be a better partner to the person that actually needed the help in that moment, which was the one that could not perform. And I know that that can be really triggering for some people probably to hear, because it's totally natural to feel like, well, but I'm the victim here, right? Like I'm the one that is on the receiving end, that my partner couldn't perform to me. It's, that is rejection. It's like, yes, I understand that, but your partner also feels incredibly badly and guilty and rejected and ashamed. And those feelings have to be acknowledged as well. And it's learning how to coexist and work together in that moment, I feel like, that helps heal some of that projection wound that can happen in that dynamic. And I feel like that extends past this example. It extends into, why do I feel um why do I feel shame, or like I want to shame others for being promiscuous, right? Like a lot of people right now, polyamory is a thing that is happening more and more. It's a dynamic that people are becoming more mainstream about and accepting, and it's not like it's a new concept. It's just people are more open to it, and they're open about expressing it. But there are still people that are so ashamed and feel that that is so other, and that that shouldn't even exist, and that that defies being in love, that defies the sacredness of sexuality. And it's like, No, it doesn't have to, right? And that is a projection of your trigger. That's a projection of your insecurity around something that you, like I said, that you feel ashamed of. And it's up to you to look at that so that you can be more tolerant of people who, you don't have to be polyamorous. You don't have to, but the more tolerant we can be, like the more we can accept and not project onto others, the more we're going to feel free in and of ourselves to express our sexuality. Because if you're shaming somebody for being poly, like it's like, what did that do to service your sexuality, your sacred sexuality that you are clinging to and purporting to be the reason that you feel the need to attack someone else for their sexuality? It's like, if you have true sacred sexuality, it does not need to attack anyone else, because your sexuality is your sexuality, their sexuality is theirs, right? So, if people want to be promiscuous, let them be. Let yourself be promiscuous. Let yourself explore that. Like, it is, there's this concept of like, I'm not allowed to be a promiscuous woman or man or human. I'm not allowed to do that because that is bad. It's like that means I'm defying my temple. And it's just like, but why is that a defiance of it? And I totally understand that if people have the religious beliefs that they have, like, I'm not trying to you know speak ill of any of that, but it's like, when we get down to the human perspective and we take away any of that and we're just thinking about promiscuity, like, it's a human thing. It's a human desire that we have to be intimate with others. It's a part of our programming. And we can try to push it down and thwart it all that we want, but it doesn't make it go away. Like, that doesn't make it go away. It doesn't do anything but shackle it. And when we shackle a caged, when we cage an animal, when we shackle someone, they're going to fight back. They're going to lash out. And unfortunately, they're going to lash out at the wrong people. We're going to lash out at people that feel different than us because we're honestly envious that they are different and that they embrace their differences. Right. So I don't know. Projection is such a tricky thing. And I feel like it can be such a beautiful growing experience for us in an 18 plus manner. It can be a beautiful thing to help us realize perhaps what we are shackling ourselves away from. So, yeah.
I agree so much with all of what you just said. Um, the one that really comes to mind, like as people think about projection, is like there's such a big difference between, like you said about polyamory as an example, like there's such a big difference between seeing somebody who's living that lifestyle and being like, I don't feel called to that. Like I don't think I want to do that. And then like as opposed to how dare they? That's disgusting. Like that second one is projection. Like
Mhm.
no, like you said, nobody's saying you have to be polyamorous. Nobody's saying you have to go to the club and pick up people. But like there's a big difference between saying like I don't feel called in that direction and hating on somebody else who is. Like
Mhm.
it's the repressed sexuality in us that hates on somebody else. I think a lot of times like another trigger for projection is seeing somebody who has the freedom that you want. And those are the people that we hate. It's like the people who, hate on gay people the loudest. It's like, dude, I can practically see in your closet where you're sitting, like they're doing it what you want. And it is envy. Like that
Mhm.
reading you just released yesterday, like transmuting people's envy for us and like when that's the root of the projection that they're offering, to not take it personally and to have compassion for them that, like the person who I talked about, like in my real life, like that's kind of the sense that I get is that if anything, we're very similar and he has similar aspirations or ambitions possibly to what I'm doing. And that I think that's a lot of where it comes from is like he's basically saying, you don't deserve that. But I know it's coming from a place where he knows he doesn't deserve it, or he thinks he doesn't,
Yeah.
and he's holding himself back and mad at me that I'm not. I'm letting
Mhm.
myself have the thing that we both want. And that's so upsetting to the person who won't let themselves have it. But it's
Absolutely.
so natural then to like take that and own it. Like, I'm a monster. Look at, he's telling me it must be true. Look how sure he is.
Hmm.
No, that's where again, I'm like, the impact that we have and the way people see us and like what they say and what they hear from us and who they think we are, like it's just such an illusion that yeah, it's like mist. It's like you can't take it and like nail it down to anything. Like it's not concrete. And so
No.
to live by it or let it be your compass or anything like that, like I am really having to grow out of that. But I think that's very, relatable in our collective that we all are kind of programmed to be afraid of social rejection, to, keep our place in the tribe and not get
Mm.
kicked out. So when people start getting mad at us or projecting on us like we're bad, I mean, our security inside the tribe starts to come into question, like that primal part of our brain. So yeah, I think it's so normal to kind of get pushed off center with those projections, but also at the same time, like a beautiful healing opportunity, like you said.
Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. Like it's a beautiful, beautiful opportunity um, to try to break free of that and to it's hard to overcome that natural programming of social rejection is the thing that honestly like it's programmed in our DNA. If you read like there's a book attached that many people have read about the different attachment styles, and I love the whole first chapter is about how that part of our survivalist instinct is lodged in our DNA, and that's why social rejection can feel so hard. It's because to be socially rejected by your tribe of sorts, in our ancestors' minds it was a death sentence to be on your own,
Yeah.
right? But now it's like it's less of it, it's not imperative to us in the way that it was for our ancestors, but it's become imperative in a different way, right? And I think that we see that through social media and stuff, like being a pariah is still scary,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
it's the scariest thing for us in a different way. It feels like social death a lot of the time, which for us feels like the worst thing possible.
But in many ways, it can be like the best thing possible. Like so
Yeah.
freeing, like to see through that illusion. So,
Mhm.
oh gosh. Do you have anything else that you want to share for anybody who's been like resonating throughout this conversation, like they're, brand new feet on the dirt in the brand new arena? Um, yeah, anything else, any words of encouragement or anything that you want to offer here at the end to close us up?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my words of encouragement are to anybody that was resonating with these messages through, like, keep keep pushing through any pain or any darkness that comes your way, and do not let that hold you back. Don't be afraid of it, as scary as it is. It's not about fighting. It's not about fighting and learning how to overcome fear of either posting a YouTube video, or posting your work online in some way, or just going after the job that you want, going after the relationship that you want. Like, there's this common misconception of, I have to fight my fear, I have to uh overcome this fear in some way. It's about, I know I've talked about this in a reading before, but that download really stuck with me. It is truly about coexisting with that. And I think that's kind of been sort of almost a mini theme of the reading, or not of the reading, where am I? Of this heart to heart. Really feels like, you know, these growth moments are blessings, even when it doesn't feel like it. And it's not about like fighting through everything, and I just have to like drudge myself through this. Like, no, it's all about our perspective shift, and like how can we look at this as the blessing that it actually is, and how can we actually grow through this and grow beside our fear in spite of it. So to anybody that needed encouragement, I guess, to do the things that they actually wanted to do, like Carly and I, like, you can do this too. We are not like, we are just humans on the other side of the screen. We are humans. We go through pain, we go through heartbreak, we go through joy, we laugh, we giggle, we mess up all the time, all the time. We're just human, and we are no different than you. And like, you can do whatever it is that you want to do. You are the only person that is holding you back. And I know sometimes it doesn't feel like that. It feels like your fear is telling you that, this person and that person and this societal construct keeps me. And it's really just you, and it's just your ego. And I know that that can be really triggering to hear. But for me, hearing that from a loved one was probably one of the most pivotal moments of my life. And it is what allowed for me to finally express myself the way that I'm doing right now. And so if you feel called to do something, know that you can do it, and know that you have so much support on your side, like from us, from the collective, from the universe. And you can coexist with your fear and still do whatever it is that you want to do. It does not have to control or define you.
I love that. Maybe some bitter medicine to hear
Yeah.
that like we're the only ones ever in our own way. But dude, swallowing that pill is liberating. You realize like you don't have to fight anything. You don't have to change anything. Like, oh, the patriarchy won't let me, or society doesn't want this, or whatever. Like, they can be exactly as they are, and you can do it anyway, as scary as it is. But yeah, like I think that's such a beautiful note to end on, is the humanity of fear and how normal and maybe even helpful it is. The more afraid we are, I think the closer we're getting to something that's like really transformative. And the ego is like you said, like not always exactly on board with that. But as long as we're safe, the ego can get on board with just about anything. So cultivating the safety and using some of the practices that you mentioned, like I'm excited to Google burlesque classes near me, and just spend some more time, like even just dancing, like you said, to get more intimate with the soft parts of ourselves that can be the source of those fears, the soft tender bits that we don't want to get accidentally stepped on or something when we put ourselves out there. Speaking of putting ourselves out there, thank you again for being here for your entire channel, every single one of your readings, and for coming on here today. This has literally been so fun for me. I mentioned these heart to hearts are like one of my most favorite things that I get to do. So thank you for letting me do it. I will link Taylor's information down in the description box. Definitely check out her channel if you're coming from the owning authenticity side and you haven't been there before. I highly recommend an 18+ reading, but she has lots of other ones that are excellent as well. Thank you everyone for listening if you've hung with us to this point, and I will catch you on the next episode. All right, bye.